Hi, HackOn attendees. My name is Matt Scheurer. My talk is called Lend Me Your IRs. You may follow me on Twitter at C3RKAH. You may also obtain a copy of these slides by going to slides.dfirmat.com. Let's begin. So what I do is I work for a big, well-known organization as an assistant vice president of computer security and incident response. However, I have many years of hands-on technical experience, including DFIR. I'm also a podcast host for ThreatReel. I do volunteer work. I'm an official Hacking is Not a Crime advocate, and I'm also a WAMSA, which is the Women's Security Alliance technical mentor. Quick disclaimer is that yes, I do have a day job. However, the opinions expressed are based solely on my own independent security research and do not express or reflect the views or opinions of my employer. The objectives are to show demo reenactments of real attacks, how these real-world attacks worked, how and why they defeated security solutions, and then we'll show instant responses to these attacks. I'm going to do demo investigation of tools and techniques, and then discuss lessons learned and key takeaways. Acronyms used just to make sure we all start off on the same page is IOC or IOC, which is an indicator of compromise, IR, which is going to be short for incident response, and then DFIR, which is digital forensics and incident response. Other disclaimers are that these demos are based on 100% true stories. These demos dutifully recreate actual attacks. However, some details were altered. Investigation demos are sped up considerably in the interest of allotted presentation time. So a lot of time and effort went into these investigations, but obviously I have just a limited time to review them on this presentation. And then you're going to see me do demos on a live Linux laptop. In real life, you should really only do these on a dedicated, securely isolated, and volatile sandbox. My first scenario I call the mystery attachment, and set the table for this. There was a news headline from August 17th of 2018. Mouse spam campaign targets banks using Microsoft Publisher. Mouse spam campaigns, nothing new. Targeting banks, nothing new. Using payloaded attachments, certainly nothing new. What was unusual about this is using Microsoft Publisher, which is incredibly uncommon. So that sort of made this newsworthy. It was reported first by TrustWave, and then it got picked up pretty heavily in the news cycle. But specifically, it was around the flawed AMI-RAT, which is part of the Nakurs botnet, as reported by TrustWave, as I mentioned just a moment ago. And there's an article link at the bottom of the slide here for that. The following week, I'm sitting at my desk, dutifully multitasking on probably many things at once, and have somebody coming up to my desk, and they're quite frantic. They're very energized and animated, telling me that one of our VIPs with access to lots of sensitive information got hit in that mouse spam campaign, and they felt that this was true because it matched all the IOCs reported in that TrustWave article and then picked up elsewhere. And again, it was a Microsoft Publisher file. In this case, the user attempted to open it on their smartphone. Now, when they first visit me, I'm thinking, okay, I'll look into this, no problem. But as they stood there talking to me, really their kind of anxiety and that energy wore off on me. And unfortunately, as you'll see later, I got very tunnel vision focused on the attachment, which they promised to get to me right away. So for the demo here, we're going to open up the file in our pretend sandbox. We're going to do detonation, research attempts, and failure to understand anything about this malicious file. And then we'll do a strings demo. I'm going to demo hashing files and searching for them, and then looking at exit data while I pondered my next steps. So let's get to it. Now, I don't actually have Microsoft Publisher on my system. The commercial sandbox I was using at the time did actually have Microsoft Publisher, but here's an example Publisher file. It's going to open for us inside of LibreOffice Draw. So let me go ahead and zoom this in just so it's a little bit easier to read. And let me make that about 200%. Scroll back up to the top. And so what was interesting about this when I'm looking at the sandbox is I see a very common display stating that macros must be enabled to display the contents of the document. To display the contents, click on the enable content button. I couldn't actually get this to trigger, and to be honest, I couldn't quite figure out where publisher really put macro files. I did some quick looking, but not being intimately familiar with Microsoft Publisher, I just really struggled to find anything. And then really, as you'll see in a moment, attempting to sort of figure out what this malicious thing might be doing was really just a struggle. I couldn't really get anywhere. So let's go ahead and look at these files, how I like to look at them. And again, just kind of go back to the slides. So we'll do strings, we'll do hashing, and then we'll check exif data next. So let me go to a prompt. Oops. And so I'm going to list out any publisher files, and here I have my scenario file. So real quickly, if I want to hash this thing, well, yeah, if I want to do that, I can basically do an MD5 sum and specify the file name, and that will spit out the hash value. I can also do different algorithms. If I want to do SHA-256 sum of the same file, you can see I can get that SHA-256 value out. So that's quickly how we can hash these files. Let me go ahead and show strings. Whenever I'm looking at anything, strings is one of the places I like to look at first, and that's simply going to pull out the human readable text, or sort of things that look like they could be human readable. It's really just looking for ASCII output and essentially giving us that information. Now, when I run strings in a file, I like to pipe it out to less. The reason for that is because it lets me look through it. I can go forwards or backwards. And looking at this particular file, I didn't find anything particularly interesting as I went through the entire thing. But sometimes you find little indicators or little hints. You can find sometimes comments. You can find a lot of helpful information by porting things out through strings. In this case, unfortunately, it didn't really pay off for me. So really from here, I'm contemplating, I don't know really quite what I'm going to do with this. So I started researching the hash value that I got and started, to kind of look at that. So you can see here on virus total, really nothing matches. Might be sort of hard to read, but you can see the actual hash value at the top there for the search. No matches found, which I thought was unusual because virus total sees so many malware samples. To get one that doesn't match anything that's been submitted is odd and also concerning, because then I start wondering, was this a targeted attack? In other words, has this been sort of custom crafted and then fired at us? Were we really being spearphished here, and somebody really took the time to select their target? You can see here Jotty malware scans, another scanner similar to virus total. There's not quite as many engines in it. There might even be some overlap, but it gives you that good second opinion. However, when I search for the hash value here, there was, again, no results. So Jotty had also not seen this. And then hybrid analysis will essentially detonate the file. It's very similar to the commercial sandbox solution that I use, just a different vendor. But this, I believe, uses the Falcon engine, and it had no results as well. So again, sort of unusual that everything I'm checking against Nothing seemed to have it. Even just a quick Google search just to see if I had any matches and hash values, if this had been, perhaps reported in an article or, a blog post, something like that, where I could actually find. So from here, I really spent a lot of time researching flawed AME, spent a lot of time researching what are the indicators of this, what does it do, and are there good write-ups on how to basically reverse this kind of thing? And I'll be the first to admit, I am not the best mobile forensics person. Where I was working at the time, we didn't have good tools for mobile, but there really wasn't anybody more capable. So now, really, I'm shifting to thinking, well, what do I do with this from here? What are my options? On an Apple smartphone, where the chances that a Microsoft Publisher file could infect it, probably pretty low, but I'm still not happy with that level of risk. So then I start thinking, well, maybe if we did a security wipe on the device, that would be sufficient, given the relative low risk of the platform involved. I'm still not quite comfortable with that, though. And so I look, and the person's not quite due for a device refresh yet, but they're under 6 months of getting a new device anyway. So I'm starting to think, well, maybe we'll just confiscate the device, put in airplane mode, throw it in the forensics lab, and let the battery die on it eventually. As I'm thinking about that, I thought, well, this is sort of silly. I haven't looked at the exif data. Now, in Windows, this is pretty simple. You right-click, you look at the file properties, you can drill into the details. It'll tell you certain things about the particular file. On a Linux host, like the one I'm demoing on, we can actually use the Perl exif tool. So let me go ahead and fire off the exif tool and put in our file. And so right away, getting the file name, some of the basic date information from when I was looking at the file, or when it was created, when it was modified last. I had to look up the MIME types here for file type extension, because obviously this being a .pub file, it didn't seem to match MIME type, again, vnd.fpx. But I looked this stuff up, and that actually is sort of the magic bytes or headers or magic numbers that are associated with Microsoft Publisher files. So it was a bit of a learning experience for me. And you can see that the file was created by Microsoft Publisher. Now, the author didn't actually say test phish, but pretty close to it. What it did actually say was, it was that facepalm moment, because it had our phishing vendor, their name in it for the author. And you have to take that with a grain of salt, because exif data can be spoofed, modified. It could be a bit of a red herring. It could even be something that threat actors might use to try to throw you off and sort of make it harder to understand where it originated from. In this case, though, I looked it up, but yeah, it's okay if you want to laugh at my pain. I spent hours drilling into this, researching it, really to, sort of think, okay, it may have been just a test phish. But I checked our secure mail gateway, looked at the message headers, and it checked out. It really did originate from our test phishing vendor. Of course, I read it as, yeah, this was really your test phishing vendor's IP address, he told. So what went wrong is I got caught up in the moment by subconsciously letting somebody else influence my investigation. Their anxiety and assumptions wore off on me, and that you should always start with the message headers when investigating phishing emails and contents. I abandoned my own standards this one time by getting hyper-focused on the file attachment first, because the other person's bad assumptions influenced my investigation. So the remediation here was really just a road to redemption. These were just painful lessons learned, for reminders that I should stick to my standard processes and procedures when I'm investigating this type of thing. If I had started by looking at the message headers first, I could have closed this out in minutes instead of hours. Because of that, no further technical actions were required. But hopefully that scenario lets you know that no matter how good you are, how long you've been doing this stuff, everybody can still make mistakes. And that was kind of a painful one that was unnecessary. But I tell you, it did actually reinforce in me always start with the message headers. And so our second scenario is security scanner evasion. To preface this, identical phishing emails started hitting inboxes. There were wide-scale reports of phishing. They came pouring in. A phishing page link no longer appeared to be working in my security scanner. So I had to ask the question, was this site already identified as malicious, taken offline by the hosting company? Or perhaps the maintainers of the site. So really, for me, I wanted to investigate and find out. So for this, we'll look at the email message, and again, we're gonna look at this demo. We're gonna note the hyperlinks and check the landing page with a security scanner. Again, it's just sort of a pretend security scanner here, since I'm doing this demo on my local system. But we'll check out the landing page source code, demo how we do that, and then we'll open the phishing page in a, again, our pretend sandbox. So let's go to the email attachment here. And make this a bit bigger so it's easier to read. And so at the top, probably a little difficult to read the headers from evil.scammer at promisewearelegit.com. And this is to phishing target, which is our unwitting.victim at randomtarget.org. And then the subject is, this link is totally safe. Of course, threat actors would never lie about such a thing, right? And so our email message looks something like, hello, phishing target. We have a really important message for you. To retrieve your message, click here. And that's not the least bit subtle. Regards, spoof sender. Now, this is an over-the-top sort of humorous example. They're not quite this bad, but I have seen things that were pretty close. No, I've never actually been brave enough, for anybody wondering, to actually try this as a phishing test template to see if other people would actually click on it. So I don't like to actually hover over hyperlinks and messages to see where they're going, or right click and get the links that way. I'm always worried that historically speaking, there were some email clients that would just execute JavaScript on like on a mouse over or on an on hover, those kind of things. So I always like to look at the message source itself. Let me go ahead and do that here in my pretend sandbox. I'll make this a bit bigger. And so in here, if I search for HTTP, that'll help me find HTTP or HTTPS things. And so here we have our hyperlink. In this case, there's only one. So let me go ahead and copy this hyperlink and see what is happening. So again, I'm going to put this in my pretend sandbox and see what happens. When I do this, Google is actually going to warn me that this is a potentially dangerous site. But I go here and I get a 404 page. So it looks like this site is, again, offline. So maybe we have nothing to worry about here. But for the slide deck, let's go ahead and grab the source and see what's happening here. And I've already done the last point here of opening the phishing page in a sandbox. Well, maybe. Remember, it's giving me a 404 right now. Let's see if that holds true as we get to that point in the scenario. So let me go ahead and get the source code, and let me go ahead and quit out of here. There's a couple ways we can do this. We can use wget and grab the file that way. If I paste in the address here, it's going to go ahead and pull down the index.html. The other thing I can do is I can use curl. And again, it really just depends what's installed in the system and what's available here. So use whatever you have. I'm going to again put in that address, and then I'm going to output that to Oh, let's call this phishing.html. And let's take a look at our HTML files. What we have here are our two files. They are both the same size in terms of bytes. Now, don't get misled. In this case, you see a more up-to-date timestamp for the one I retrieved using curl. That's really just a because I'm doing this on a local system. If you were actually pulling this off of a external web server, you would have a more consistent timestamp with what you were expecting. Let me go ahead and clear that. And so we've seen they're the same size, but I can also show that forensically these are the same. So if I do a SHA-256 sum and I do start at HTML, what we'll see here is that both of these files have the exact same hash values. Forensically, these two files are the same. Didn't matter which method I used to obtain them. They are both really the same. So use whatever you have available in your system is my advice. So let's go ahead and open this up in an editor. And we'll take a look at the index one. And I'm going to go ahead and make this a bit bigger so it's easier to see and read. All right, and so what we have here is a pretty typical HTML file. When we start looking at this, what's interesting is if navigator.useragent.index of, and here we have a line for Chrome. And notice we have an interesting window location here. What that's doing is that's checking. This is an if statement that's checking to see if the browser is Chrome. And if it is, it's redirecting the traffic to this particular page. Here we have very similar lines for Edge, one for Firefox, one for old school Microsoft Internet Explorer, one for Opera, one for Safari. And note that they all go to the same page. They all have that same location. What gets interesting though is our final else statement. So in other words, if none of these conditions up here were matched, or it sends to this page, this error/404.html. So what's interesting is this is actually checking to see if the web page is going or what's hitting in the web page is an actual web browser. So if the user agent string is a security scanner tool, for example, it may not see it. And so what gets interesting here is we can go to the same address in, again, my browser and take a look here. And lo and behold, it's the same web address, except it's getting redirected to an actual payload page. And here we have a fake Microsoft 365 login page as opposed to the 404. So very interesting, very sneaky for the threat actors. So, because our results were that, again, browser user agent string based redirection. And in this case, I got really lucky because they were using JavaScript, which is a client side language within the code. If they'd been using a server side language like PHP or Perl or Python, something like that, and a whole host of others, we would never actually be able to see the source code. It's true we would tell, in a sandbox session and in a packet capture, for example, that the web traffic was getting redirected, but we wouldn't necessarily understand the behind the scenes magic of how and why it was getting redirected. And so where this gets a little scary is the threat actors could, if they had an exploit that, let's say, only worked against Firefox browsers, they could check just for Firefox and send that to a malicious payload page, drop the malware, and then redirect back to the actual page. Usually that kind of thing would happen so fast that most end users aren't even going to notice the snap of a finger delay it would take to get redirected around. And then not just a specific browser, but down to a specific vulnerable version. So in other words, if patch versions of Firefox aren't susceptible to our fictitious payload idea here, we could send the patched browsers to the page and only send the vulnerable browsers to our malicious payload and then redirect them around. That gets really hard to detect, by the way, because if you're analyzing it using something that isn't vulnerable, you would never see the bad content as well. And so if those two things are combined, we definitely have some scary options here. In this case, the remediation plan was really, we determined the actual phishing landing page and we blocked it through web content filtering. We also worked with our secure email gateway vendor to block the active phishing campaign. Our final scenario is called the rabbit hole. And to preface this, I received a request from a user to investigate an email message they received to determine if it was legitimate or not. The email appeared fishy at first glance, but is it just suspicious or is it malicious? Which is actually the title of an old talk, one in which I tell people, yes, start your email investigations using your message headers. If you remember back to scenario 1, I forgot my own lesson. And so that's what really kind of made that one painful for me and what sticks out in my mind. So anyway, let's continue. The investigation, I could tell from the message headers that the source IP address was a mismatch for the sender's domain. The message source code was particularly interesting. The link text didn't match the hyperlink destination. We'll take a look at that. The malicious threat actor's objectives appeared to be credential harvesting site. We'll take a look at that for the purposes of account takeover. So let's go ahead and take a look at our message here and see what's going on. And I'll make this bigger again, just to make it a bit easier to read. So here we have from PayPal support, but it's coming from pp support at pwned-server.org. So if it's not coming from paypal.com right away, kind of a suspicious red flag. Again, targeting our phishing target, unwitting.victim@randomtarget.org. The subject is PayPal bank account change confirmation. And so interesting, if you have a PayPal account and you know you didn't make changes, why are you getting this kind of an email? And so when a person reads it and it says, we received a request to update your bank account on file, this process will complete in the next 4 hours. If you did not request these changes to your PayPal account, please log in to reject the pending activity. And what's interesting is the link that you see on the screen is actually a legitimate PayPal login webpage. Sincerely, PayPal support. But the question is, that's what the link text says, but does it actually go there? So again, if I come in here and look at our message source, I can make this a bit bigger. And again, do my search for HTTP. And what's interesting is here's what we see in the message text, which is paypal.com/us/signin. The actual hyperlink, though, is going somewhere else. It is actually going to a web page in Belgium. It's got a .be domain. So that's interesting because I don't expect to see that in my, if this was really coming from PayPal. Now, again, we're kind of tipped off that this was bad traffic, but let's go ahead and take a look here and see what's going on with this, because we have probably a pretty good idea what's going to happen here. So we've looked at the link text. Let's go ahead and see what that web page looks like if I go back to the browser, and I'm going to go ahead and put this in here and go to it. And lo and behold, what we have is what looks like a PayPal login page. Again, asking for email address or mobile number. But yeah, definitely, again, our radar is way up that this was something bad rather than, legitimate traffic to the domain. So let's go ahead and unravel this a little bit. And if you remember how we used curl and wget previously, we'll do that with our file as well. Let me advance in the slide deck here. And let's take a look here. So the landing page, again, appears to go to a compromised web host in a foreign country, but doesn't stop there. So we're going to grab the source code, see if we can answer that question. And I'm going to curl the address again. We'll go ahead and output that. And we'll call it first page.html. And let's see what that looks like in our editor. I misspelled it. No worries. Okay, let me go ahead and make this a bit bigger. So this is a very small HTML file for what I expect to be a login page. But what's interesting is we see a meta HTTP equiv refresh content equals 0. So this is a refresh meta tag or a meta command, and it's not going to wait. It's going to do it instantaneously. What gets interesting, though, is we see this other address in here. And so what's happening is when a visitor goes to the page, it's redirecting instantly to this other domain. And .de would imply that it's a German page. If we come back into the web browser and we look, sure enough, in the address bar, it is our .de domain page. So this is interesting because now the threat actors have gone from different layers of obfuscation, from hiding the actual hyperlink by basically presenting the user with link text that doesn't match the hyperlink. They've got a web server in one country. It's instantly redirecting to a compromised web server, likely in another country, as we've just seen. And so our question is, well, does this thing stop there? We're going to grab the source code again and find out and answer that question. So let me go ahead and curl and see if I got the right address. We're going to output that to, we'll call it second page.html. Grab that, pull it up in a text editor, and we'll see what we have here. So this is a little bit different. It's not a HTTP meta refresh redirect. We see the page title here, log in your PayPal account, but again, very small amount of stuff. What you see here, though, is the body style. We've got no margin, no padding, overflows hidden. In other words, this is a seamless iframe, as you see down here. So this will be a web page that's serving up content in an iframe, and it's going to look like the page that you're actually at. And again, if you saw in the address of the browser, it showed that we were in a German domain. But what's interesting is it's actually serving up content from a third address. And so what we have here is a .nl, which would be a Netherlands domain. So we've now bounced to another compromised host in another country, as it would seem. So begs the question once again, does it stop there or does it continue on? So we'll go ahead and clear that, and let me go ahead and do curl. We're going to put in our domain here, and I'm going to output that, and we'll call it third page.html. And we'll see what this looks like in our text editor. So this gets kind of crazy. We have a JavaScript file and something which is a document unescaped sequence and a bunch of gibberish that's not really human understandable. Yes, it's ASCII text, but can't really make sense of it. We got really long lines here, and we can see the end of the script. And so just from experience, when I see something like this, I'm going to guess that this might be a function, just again, based on experience. And I've actually made this, believe it or not, more readable by putting in some of the white space here so that you can see the code and where the sequence ends and where what I suspect is my function begins. The reality is that threat actors could just jam this whole thing together as this one continuous blob, making it a little bit harder to identify things like a function or the document unescaped sequence amidst all the sort of encoded content here. So let's see if we can figure out what exactly is going on. So it appears they use JavaScript to avoid analysis and detection while also hiding the page source, which we, it's pretty clear, right? So what we want to do, though, and the thing I want to let people know, in the old days, what we would have to do for something like this is we would have to manually unescape the sequence, feed the function back into it in order to get the readable code out. The most important thing to remember, though, is if something renders in a browser, it has to be something that can be decoded. Otherwise, a visitor to the page would never actually be able to see it. What's great about modern web browsers is they have awesome developer tools built in that help us do those sort of things. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and close a couple of these out and go to our sort of destination page. And when we come here, again, it's the content we expect to see. And now we're actually going to where the stuff is actually hosted. So if I come in here and I go into browser developer tools, when I look at this, it's not really telling me a whole lot of interesting stuff. If I do edit HTML, and again, it starts off and it's the same code we just looked at. It's very difficult to read and look at. And again, it's not really human understandable. But what's great is if you keep scrolling after you've edited the HTML, we'll actually get to parts where, oh, now look, we actually have code that we can read. And so here we see JavaScript, we see something calling a function, and we see our unescaped sequence already unescaped for us. What gets interesting, though, is while we start seeing HTML stuff, we see more encoded content here. And looking at this blob, or this section here, shortcut icon, based on the MIME type that's getting declared here, the image X icon, and so we see base 64 after that. I'm going to go ahead and guess that this is likely base 64 encoded content, and it might be the fav icon file based on the MIME type that we saw. We get to where we actually have human readable code again, and then we get back into another blob of stuff. This one's a little bit different, and so we have data image based on the MIME type here, probably a JPEG file. Again, base 64 we see, and again, more content that isn't human readable. So this is definitely interesting stuff. We've seen that, and we've also seen that they are using base 64 encoded elements inside of the JavaScript code that we've looked at. And so let's take a look at how we can actually decode that base 64 using the browser developer tools, and also going kind of old school with it and seeing what that looks like by hand. So what's really cool is I can come in here to the network tab. If I come in here and refresh the page, now that I've got it loaded, now back in the developer tools, it's actually retained the files here. And I see this data image JPEG, again, that matches what we were just looking at. And when I look in here, here again, base 64, and it looks like we have really the same base 64 encoded content that we had before. What's really cool is in the developer tools, if we hit preview, we can actually see what that image file looks like. And here we see a PayPal logo. If I come to the page, it's real easy to place up here at the top that where that PayPal logo is and understand what happened. Going back to the developer tools, though, one of the things that we didn't see is, oops, let me go back to developer tools, is we don't see the other base 64 encoded item in here. We've got basically, the page, some JavaScript code, some other things. But if I come back in here, and again, if I do the edit HTML and scroll back down, we had that first item that we didn't have. And again, we were thinking it might be an icon. So how we base 64 decode things by hand is I'm just going to go ahead and copy this whole big blob of encoded stuff, everything in between the quotes here. And I'm going to open up a new tab here in gedit. And I'm going to paste this whole blob of stuff in here. And again, it's not really human readable stuff. And so let me go ahead and see then if I can save this particular file out. So there's the save button, and we'll go ahead and put it in our DFIR folder, and let's go ahead and call this, unknown.txt. And so what we can do to decode this is using the base 64 command, -D to decode. -I is just going to ignore any warnings so that it won't get hung up. And so I've got unknown.txt. Let me call this one unknown.ico. Again, based on the MIME type. So I'm base 64 decoding the file, basically redirecting the output to this .ico file. And if I come here and look at the folders, let's see what we have. Looks like we've got a file here. We didn't get any errors. So, all right, so we've done that. Let me go ahead and see if this opens up. Oops. Let me go ahead and pick a image program, and this is going to be really difficult to look at. Let me make this a whole lot bigger. And we can see that our base 64 decode operation actually seemed to work. And I'm going to guess then, based off the MIME type, based off everything else we looked at, that's the fave icon. And when we look here, I know it's going to be really hard to see on the recording, but in the upper left, you can see the fave icon of the PayPal logo. So we've, at this point, successfully decoded that. So our remediation plan in this scenario is we determine the final phishing landing page. We've blocked that through web content filtering. We've blocked all the intermediary compromised web servers along the way. From we went through like 3 different countries in total. And then we reported compromised websites to domain owners and hosting companies through their Whois contact records. Once upon a time, back when this was a real investigation, Whois information was not privatized by and large, and so it was a lot easier to identify who to notify when you spotted bad things. Not quite the case anymore. So that's what I have for that scenario. With all of these scenarios, the things I've learned over the years since then, one great thing I love is called CyberChef. It's the Cyber Swiss Army knife, and it's an open source web application. You just simply download it, unzip it. If you have an HTML compatible web browser, doesn't matter. It's agnostic to the operating system. You can open that up and use it. And so, yeah, I've learned to use CyberChef. I use it frequently. A lot of the things I demoed, decoding content, running strings on things, pulling out EXIF data. You can do a whole lot more with it. And there's a link to CyberChef. There's also, I created a 2-hour CyberChef workshop, absolutely free. You can go to workshops.dfirmat.com and download those files. And the text file is the lab guide. It'll step anybody who wants to go through it every step of the way. So some neat little exercises with a lot of different scenarios built out that really sort of just barely scratches the surface on CyberChef. There's a lot of other great resources in the lab guide as well that people can check out afterwards. So highly encourage it. That's really all I have. In closing, as you see me online or at a conference somewhere, please reach out, share your own DFIR stories. Friends, Romans, HackCon attendees, lend me your IRs. And with that, thank you very much. Again, encourage folks, give me a follow on Twitter if you're so inclined. Grab a copy of the slide decks by going to slides.dfirmat.com. I want to thank HackCon again for having me and really appreciate the opportunity to present here today. Thank you.